Hi there, guys. My name's Cody, and I'm schizophrenic.
My name is Gabe, and I'm bipolar.
And people don't like when we say that.
People don't. It pisses them right off.
So this video that we're making for you guys is about first-person language, which we both have gotten a lot of hate about because I have schizophrenic in my username. Gabe has been identifying as bipolar for a long time, and people get very upset that we don't refer to ourselves as a person living with schizophrenia.
And a person living with bipolar disorder.
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to talk about this because this is a topic that I know you've talked about independently, I've talked about independently, but I think it would help people to hear from two different people struggling with mental illness who we don't identify as our mental illness, but how I choose to identify with what I go through should be up to me. And that's kind of what I want to get through to people on this. So I'll let you kind of start. But one of the things I loved when I first found your content was you talk about this because people will get upset with you for saying, my name's Gabe and I'm bipolar. And to me, like that wouldn't have even crossed my mind that that's an issue to some people. So can you explain to me first why people are mad about that? And then second, why you choose to continue doing it, knowing that it does upset some people.
So the first thing is the whole genesis of the thing is that you're more than just bipolar, right?
Yeah.
So when I say my name is Gabe and I'm bipolar, they say no, you're much more than that. And that's why they say you should say that you're a person living with bipolar, because now you're just listing the one thing. But you know, the English language is complicated.
Yeah.
So for example, if I say I'm married, nobody says no, you're more than just married.
Yeah.
If I say I'm hungry, people say no, you're more than just your biological urges to eat. And even in the disease space, I'm diabetic. Nobody loses their mind.
Yeah.
But for some reason, in the mental health space, if you say I'm bipolar, what people hear is I'm just bipolar. I identify as bipolar. I have no other identity. I only think of myself as a collection of illness, and I must have low self-esteem, and I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm sad that people assume that that's what I mean. But I'm actually more sad that when I say, no, I know, they don't believe me.
Yeah.
They think that this choice of words, which I didn't invent the English language, Cody.
Yeah.
This isn't my fault.
You weren't the first person to say bipolar.
Yeah, I wasn't the first. I didn't make the language structure and syntax. I'm just, you know, I didn't ask to have bipolar disorder. I didn't ask for any of it.
Yeah.
This is just the way that it came out. And I don't have a problem with it. And what makes me sad is I say, look, I should be allowed to identify my own journey. And they're like, no. I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean no? And I want to be very clear before we go any further. I am not offended by the phrase, I live with bipolar disorder at all. Yeah, I never could. And that's the thing that gets me. If you said, my name is Cody and I live with schizophrenia, everybody be okay.
Yeah.
But if you say, I'm schizophrenic, you get corrected. Well, but why is nobody correcting the other way? Since there's two sides to this debate, apparently.
Well, and that's something like when I started doing social media, my intention was never to use the username SchizophrenicHippie. It actually came from a hate comment. So someone did use it in a negative way. They said, oh, look, it's a schizophrenic hippie. To which I said, that's actually a pretty dope username. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, that kind of thing is cool. I like it.
So I did. And like I continued like before and after that point, I referred to myself as schizophrenic all the time. It wasn't until I started like getting bigger on social media that people started correcting me. Because when I was just starting out as an advocate, when I was sharing my story with like local legislators or in peer support groups, no one in there would have said, oh, Cody, you're not schizophrenic. You're a person with schizophrenia. It's like in this moment, I'm choosing to say I'm schizophrenic. And the reason I have always said that is one, it's not all that I am, but it's played such a big role in my life. Like I am not where I thought I would be. I had to basically rebuild my life because of schizophrenia. So although it's not my whole life, it's not my whole identity, I would be lying if I said that it hasn't had the most impact on my life today and where I thought I'd be. And so I think it is relevant to the conversation, especially when I'm talking about where I am today, what I'm doing, the fact that I do social media. I don't say I'm a person living with schizophrenia that does social media. I say I am a schizophrenic content creator. Like that. And
I'm a bipolar author, podcaster, and speaker.
Exactly. And so to me, it's just another descriptor. It's not the only one. Like
well,
you
it
said,
it's easier on the business card. I'm not
schizophrenic is already such a long word.
It is, and there's a Z in it. I mean, it's huge. It's huge. Cody, the biggest problem that I have is that, we have limited time to connect with people. And any barrier that you put in between connection, like adding excess words or explaining things in a way that doesn't feel right to you, it diminishes that connection. And people ask me all the time, they're like, Gabe, it bothers people. Why do you do it?
Yeah.
Right. Like if you know it bothers people, just don't do it and then you'll stop bothering them. And that is a fair question. And I want to answer that question that you posed. The reason that I don't do it is because while it may bother them, other people don't recognize that I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
For example, you said that you found me off of a podcast called A Bipolar, a Schizophrenic, and a Podcast. And what you really resonated with is that the two hosts described themselves as bipolar and schizophrenic.
Yeah.
In that moment in your life, schizophrenia was playing a much larger role. It was impacting you in a much bigger way, and you were actively seeking support, and you found it. You might not have found it if I named the podcast Two People Living with Mental Health Issues. You might not have thought that, your mental health issues, that could be work-life balance. That could be anxiety. That could be struggling managing the kids or fighting with my spouse. And then you wouldn't have found the content.
Yeah.
And so if we just look at it from a practical standpoint, I want to make sure that all of the people I'm trying to reach recognize that I'm talking to them. I just want to make sure that people recognize themselves in the content. And that's why I use it. It's shorthand, it's quicker, and people see it and they know that I'm talking to them.
Yeah. So I had a very similar experience, and I've told you this story. I haven't really talked about this on social media much. I was very afraid that SchizophrenicHippie would prevent me from being able to get speaking opportunities and being able to share my story. And so at one point, I tried to change my username to my real name, Cody Green. One, my fans and followers were not a fan. They did not like that I tried to change it to my real name. But two, I immediately saw what you were talking about because I would get comments from people saying, I tried to find your content and I couldn't find it because I couldn't remember your name. And so having the word schizophrenia or schizophrenic in my username allowed people to immediately find my content. All they have to do is literally think, oh, who's the guy with the schizophrenic? I'll just type in schizophrenic. Boom, there I am. And like you said, a lot of people are seeking my content in the midst of them really struggling, and I want them to be able to find it easily. And so, like you said, just for practicality, I also love talking about the fact that why do people care how I identify? Because that's the part that really confuses me. I'm like, I'm not saying schizo. I'm not saying I'm not using a derogatory, I would prefer that people don't use schizo. But if it's a person living with the illness, how they choose to identify with it is going to be really up to them. In my opinion, I don't get policing people for this terminology, especially when they're living with it. We don't want people just throwing around shortened terms or misusing it. Like everyone has heard someone say, oh, the weather is so bipolar today. We don't want people misusing the terminology or anything like that. But I also feel like I should be able to identify with it however I see fit as a person living with it. And I've never understood the pushback on that.
You want to throw a nice little wrinkle in here? I'm not offended by the weather is bipolar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because bipolar has a meaning. Bipolar is a word. Bipolar means the opposite of two poles.
Yeah.
Right? Bipolar. So if the weather is sunny one minute and storming the next minute, then by golly, the weather is bipolar.
Okay.
Now, I recognize that there is a context discussion to have here. And I don't believe in policing language. I do believe in policing context.
Yeah.
For example, if Cody comes up to me and says, hey, Gabe, you're bipolar. I'm like, yes, I am. Right? That's cool.
Yeah.
But if somebody says, you suck, you're bipolar. Well, now I'm offended. Well, why? I didn't care that Cody called me bipolar. Now somebody's going to say, well, maybe it was the suck part. Yeah. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the fact they were insulting me. Maybe it was many things. But the point is that I evaluated each one independently of their own and decided how I felt about it. I didn't create a blanket statement with a blanket emotion that applied 100% of the time. And I think that's part of being emotionally regulated and fit. Because here's another thing. Cody, you and I, we work with a lot of people who are at the beginning of their journeys, and they haven't heard about person first language or this whole debate yet. They don't have these words. Could you imagine if somebody suffering from a severe and persistent mental illness finally reached out for help, and they just walked up to somebody and they said, look, I'm bipolar and I'm going crazy and I'm thinking about committing suicide because I'm just a nut job wacko. And the person looks them dead in the eyes and says, well, first off, you're contemplating suicide, and you wouldn't commit suicide, you'd complete suicide. And also, you're way more than just bipolar. I mean, you're a whole person. And also, we don't use phrases like crazy and nut job. Those are offensive terms. And the person would, very accurately apologize because they'd feel chastised and badly. Yeah. And then they would probably change the subject. They wouldn't trust you. They'd feel bad. But instead, if somebody walked up and said that exact same thing to me, I'd say, oh my God, are you okay?
Yeah.
What can I do?
Yeah.
Tell me what's going on in your world. Talk to me. How can I help? Now, yes, if the person told me I'm bipolar, I'm only bipolar, I will never be more than bipolar, bipolar is my only identity, I will never achieve anything other than bipolar, then yes, I would immediately reply, you are way more than just bipolar. But the fact is when people talk to me and when people are talking about their bipolar disorder, it's not a just situation. That's what they want to talk about. I mean, could you imagine this? What if a person walks up to me, or you for that matter, and says, hi, Gabe, I'm a person living with bipolar disorder and I'm struggling. And I say, oh, let's talk about Marvel movies. Do you think Thanos did it? And they're like, well, I wanted to talk about bipolar disorder because that's what I need help with, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, but you're so much more than just bipolar, and that's why I want to see how you feel about Marvel movies.
Yeah.
That would be so inappropriate. So whenever anybody says, but Gabe, you're just so much more than bipolar, yeah, not at work. I don't mean that mean.
Yeah.
People are in fact multifaceted, but just like there's certain things that teachers can't do while they're teaching, like swear.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they can't go home and use the F word to reckless abandon. But if you're a kindergarten teacher, you're probably not wearing club clothes, pulling up with your bass music with MF or every other word in your dance music, and you're walking in your platform shoes and I don't know, spiked blue hair and calling the children MFers.
Yeah.
But you're more than welcome to do that on Saturday. So again, I don't understand why people hear when somebody says I'm schizophrenic and what they believe is that person has succumbed to that being their entire identity.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way anywhere else.
Well, not only that, but I think we might get this more as content creators because people will hear me say I'm schizophrenic and then also make several videos about my schizophrenia, thinking that because I'm doing that, I still only believe that's the only thing going on in my life. They don't see that after I'm done making that video, I go for a hike with my wife and my dogs. I go out to dinner. I travel. I do all of these things, but my day job is advocacy. It's teaching people about schizophrenia. It is a big part of my life. It has been for many years. And I don't know why both can't be true. Like, yes, I have this job that requires me to talk about mental illness. And I know people want to hear about it. That's why I do this work. But that can also be true with the fact that I understand it's not the only thing about me. I play video games. I do all sorts of things that have nothing to do with my schizophrenia. But when I'm making content, my mission is to help people better understand schizophrenia, know how to cope better with it, how they can find resources. And that's what I'm sharing. So when I talk about me being schizophrenic, it is, especially at work. It's like this is what I talk about. It's the topic that people follow me to learn about. And so I find it just really interesting when people will log on, they'll go out of their way to come to one of my videos, watch the video, and then say, you're not schizophrenic. You're a person living with schizophrenia. You're missing all of the content that I'm putting out there.
You completely missed the point.
Exactly.
And that's what's sort of sad for me. And that's, again, people are like, why do you care so much? And it's because of that missed connection. Yeah. That person saw your video pouring out your heart with information about schizophrenia, and all they could think about was that you don't go hiking, or that you don't have a wife, or that you don't have a mom, or that you don't celebrate Christmas, or that you don't like music, or that you don't have a hobby. And You know, I'm going to be a smartass for a minute.
Yeah.
You ever go to a concert, right? Like where you love the band.
Yeah.
And instead of the band playing, they start espousing like religious views or political views or social commentary.
Yeah.
And the first thing that pops in your head is shut up. I'm paying you to sing.
Play the music I want to listen to.
Right.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah.
That person is being multifaceted.
Yeah.
That person is showing you that they're more than just a band.
Yeah.
But then suddenly you're mad. You're like, why are you lecturing me on this? I didn't come here for a lecture. I came here because I like your music. Yeah, that's how I feel. You came here to learn about bipolar disorder, but then you're concerned that I'm unaware of it. And I do want to switch gears ever so slightly. And I'm not trying to take over your show, Cody. I'm really not. But I do wonder why people think I'm damaging anybody.
Yeah.
And that really, because I do listen, I do read them, and I do take them very seriously. And people will say things like, by saying that you live with bipolar, you're hurting a whole class of people and you're creating stigma and discrimination.
Yeah.
And I read these and I think about them a lot, and I'm sorry, I don't see it. Describing my life in the way that is most authentic to me cannot possibly create stigma for you.
Yeah. Well, and my question for you is, and I already know the answer because I get this, how often is it patients with bipolar disorder that are saying it versus people who are defending individuals with bipolar disorder?
So I'm really glad that you brought that up. First things first, it's not never patients. But,
I know
it's
that. Yeah.
It's a ratio of probably 9-1.
Yeah.
They're almost always people from the medical community, social workers, psychologists, therapists, caregivers,
Yeah.
right? A lot of family members, parents who would tell me about, their brother, sister, cousin, friend, et cetera, and how I am being offensive.
Yeah.
That is 80% of it, if not 90. I almost never hear from a patient. And in fact, when I do hear from a patient, I usually start a dialogue because it's interesting.
Same.
Right? So that's how infrequently it's a patient. It usually a flurry of emails or comments will go back and forth because I'm honestly curious as to why they have arrived at a different conclusion than the vast majority of patients. But what I want to say is you've hit the nail on the head for another reason. This whole Person First Language initiative did not come from patients. It came from the social work community. A group of people without mental illness have determined the way people with mental illness should describe their own journeys. That seems fundamentally wrong to me.
Yeah.
Being told by people who do not have my lived experience how to talk about my lived experience seems infantilizing. It seems authoritarian. It seems wrong.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine the backlash if men put out a guide for how women should describe femininity or how women should describe their experience. And they declared these rules to be valuable, correct, accurate, and any other way of doing it is wrong. Mm-hmm. I can already hear the backlash.
Yeah, and you can say that for any group.
Yeah, and that's any group. And that is correct, by the way.
Yeah.
If women told men how to describe their experience being male, that would be wrong.
Yeah.
If white people told minority members how to describe, that would be wrong, and vice versa, and on until we're blue in the face. But for some reason, when the medical community tells people with mental illness how to talk about it, it became fact. Mm-hmm. That is more disturbing to me than almost any other point that we can make.
Well, and I'm going to end on this because I just did an Instagram post about this where someone reached out to me and said, you can't say that you are schizophrenic. That is the exact wording they used. This was not a patient. This was not even a caregiver. This was not someone in the medical community. This was someone who just didn't like that I used the word schizophrenic because someone told them that it wasn't okay. My guess is not a patient. I made a post where I explained why this frustrates me. People with schizophrenia make up less than 1% of the population, but we make up over 20% of the homeless rate. We have the highest rates of addiction, suicide, and until those issues are dealt with, I could care less about what you call schizophrenia. You could call it group chat for all I care. Like, what you call it matters so little to me because not only, am I not dealing with a lot of those things anymore? People with schizophrenia also have incredibly high rates of incarceration. And so it's like all of these things are going on, and you want to tell me that the issue you're worried about is what I, a patient who is trying to make a difference for my community, is calling it. that bothers me so much. We can all be doing so much better to find resources for people to learn more about the illness. There's so many better ways to spend your time than policing what a patient is calling their illness or how they're identifying with it. And that's kind of my final thought on it. But I really appreciate you having this conversation with me, because this is another topic that we have talked about forever. And I would love to hear opinions from, if you're a patient who strongly believes that we shouldn't be saying schizophrenic or bipolar, let us know why. Because every conversation I have with a patient tends to lead back to, well, I was told that wasn't appropriate. Not even that they believe it, but that's what they were told. So I would love to hear more reasoning behind people who do believe that. But thank you so much for coming. For those of you who don't follow Gabe, make sure you follow him on Instagram and TikTok, Ask a Bipolar. You can also check out his book, Mental Illness is an Asshole. And he's got several podcasts, and the Inside Bipolar podcast, and Bipolar, a Schizophrenic, and a podcast. And yeah, find him on social media. But thanks so much for being a part of this conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me. I always appreciate it.
Yeah.